before I even start, I want to say that this is probably one of the most important lessons that you can learn, because everything else is a strategy, right? So you can have a strategy how to trade, you can have a indicator how to trade, you can have processes and plans how to trade. But the point is, if you mess up your trading capital, then you're out of the game. So what I'm trying to say is this section that we're going to be covering today is by far one of the most important lessons I've learned personally. And it helps you think about trading in a different way. And I'm hoping to share that experience with you guys today. Okay, so let's get stuck into today's session. Now, as a trader, whether you are brand spanking new or if this is the 10th year of you trading, you face the same risks in the market, right? And people sometimes think there's this magical system, or there's the best strategy or the best thing that you can use to make sure that you make money, right? But they often fall short, even if they had a fantastic system. They fall short in the management of their emotions and their capital in order for that system's dynamics to play out. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, even with the best trading system, if you don't cover these bases properly, you will never get to experience longevity in trading. And also, you'll see a little bit later, even from a personal point of view, you might not even enjoy trading anymore. So let's help you get over some of that anxiety. When you trade, right, one of the biggest risks that you have is that you commit way too much capital to any one single trade. Now, what happens in that case is normal days go by, nothing happens. You get used to this habit of trading kind of like a bit of a cowboy, because you know that allure of quick wealth is always in the background. Like if you put a big trade on, the rewards can be phenomenally big, right? So that attractiveness of that is always playing in one's mind in the background. But the problem is, if something happens on those days, and if you've been in the market long enough, you know there are ample days like that you just can't get anything right. The market goes crazy, and you actually end up wiping out all your capital, or a very, very big chunk of your capital, in one single market event. The second point is that if you do survive point number one, quite often, and this I see especially with new traders, the minute that you have some profit on the table, everybody's so excited that, hey, at least this trade's not losing money, right? Let's take some money, let's take some profit and bank it. And there's a saying in the market that you can't go broke taking a profit. And a lot of people live by that rule. So I want to show you today that that's not exactly 100% true. There's a couple of things you have to just keep your eyeballs on. And if you collectively manage it like that, then yes, then you can have a reasonable chance. But you need to make sure that you don't take the profits too soon relative to the risk that you usually take as part of your strategy. Right? And then the last point is that without keeping an eye on your overall capital, you might end up trading yourself into a hole. So what I'm saying here, what I'm perceiving here is, very slowly but surely, you're actually moving backwards. You're not really protecting your newly acquired capital. So the example that you'll see is, we're going to show you how to make sure that all the little bit of help that or all the little bit of capital that you make, that you can make sure that that's protected as well. So what we're going to first start off today is to say, okay, when we look at trading, right, we're going to experience the thrill of the ride, and we want to make sure that you enjoy trading, because trading really is a ton of fun. If you do it right, trading is a ton of fun. But you need to strike that delicate balance as to where your own personality sits. So quite often, you're not really geared towards high risk, even though a lot of people think, hey, I can take all the risks in the market, I'm quite happy with it. A good test on this is, if you ever put a trade on and you absolutely cannot stop thinking about that trade, it occupies your mind space at any point in time when you're not thinking of anything else. When you wake up in the middle of the night thinking about the trade, chances are that trade is probably a little bit too big in size for your comfort level, and you need to find that balance as to where that sits in order for you to make sure that you have longevity, because that's kind of what we want to make sure. And I'll show you especially how we want to prepare to be in the game for as long as possible. So the three tools that are used by professional traders are focused around the concepts as follows, right? So it's basically saying what we're going to be doing is we're going to make sure that we risk a certain percentage of our portfolio. Now, that percentage is completely up to you. It really is depending on your own risk tolerance. I'm going to show you, though, where I think the sweet spot lies and how come I say that and what am I using to back that up. And I'm going to show you just some analysis as to where I think that should be. But then in conjunction to that, a lot of people just stop here, right? They say if I just risk a certain percentage of my portfolio or my trade to any one trade, I'm going to be fine. That's not right. You have to also look at the actual trade statistics. Now, I've always maintained that trading has far more to do with human behavior and statistics than it does with luck, right? So what I'm going to show you is if you don't keep your eye on your trade statistics, even though you might have this in place, you're actually going to lose trades over the long, or lose your money over the long run, right? And then lastly, there's a very, very big mental block that I can help you with if you just adhere to this max drawdown limit. And I'm going to show you the importance of this and why having a holistic view. So in other words, I wouldn't say just this one is important or just that one is important. You really need to understand and appreciate all three of them and how they play in together into one single risk management strategy. Because the premise behind all of this is there will always be trades. You will always find the next best trade. You'll always find the perfect setup, right? But if you run out of capital, then you can't have that opportunity work for you. And that's what we're trying to achieve here. We want to make sure that you stay in the game long enough to see all these fantastic trades, and then that you have capital available to apply to those trades so that you can actually then have the benefit of there. Now, let's start off first with the percentage of risk per trade. Now, I'm going to propose that the sweet spot, right, of risk here sits between 1% and 3% of your available capital. So if you've got $100 to trade, then we're never going to risk more than, well, so let's say $1,000. That's probably a more reasonable number just to run the example, what I'm saying. Then you're never going to risk more than $100, right? If $10, which is 1% of the portfolio value, right? And there's a very, very important reason for that, because the minute that you've scaled down your trades, you become almost, to a sense, indifferent to the outcome of that trade. And that is mentally so important for a new trader. Let me go just so that I can give you a feel for this. Why am I picking this 1%? Why am I not picking 10%? I'm going to go give you a bit of a feel for that, right? Now, the most common way that people usually explain this is, in fact, a coin. Now, I want to make sure you don't tie this into gambling, right? So flipping a coin is kind of like gambling in a way, because you don't know what the outcome is, right? And I'm not using the analogy because I think trading is like gambling. What I'm using the analogy for is the uncertainty, and I want to explain possibility and probability to you. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to say you have a coin. You're going to be able to flip that coin, and we're going to play a game, right? So we're saying you can bet whatever you want. That's your own choice. You can bet whatever you want as a percentage. So if I'm going to give you $100, you can put down $10 on a flip. You can put down $50 on a flip. You can even put down $100 on that flip. There's no rules in that sense. You can choose. The second component is we're going to say the results have got no memory, right? You can understand why I'm saying that. The coin itself does not remember what it did the last time. The coin doesn't have a memory. So when you flick it, the chances of it landing on heads and tail remains completely the same as before the flip. So we're not going to say the historical relationship influences the outcome, right? And we're going to just make one rule. We're going to say the coin cannot land on its side. And then that makes our example nice and easy. It basically says there's only two outcomes. Now, I want you to just understand this. Now, this is not going to make a lot of sense now because we haven't spoken about drawdown limits yet. But I just want to show you something in leading up to that concept of what we're going to be talking about, drawdown limit. Now, remember, my premise here is I want to make sure that you can withstand negative trades. I want to make sure that you stay in the game as long as possible. Now, what I want to show you is just on a percentage risk basis. So if I use 1% of capital, now I want to just quickly explain that. if I have $100, right, and I say I would like to allocate 1% to it, then my risk will be $1. That makes sense, right? If my capital has devalued now to $90 only, I'm not going to still now bet $1 because that's no longer 1% of my capital. My capital now that I'm going to bet is 90 cents. So you can see kind of what happens now is your risk is scaled up and down depending on how good you could do. So if you're starting to lose money, automatically by following this rule, you start betting less and less and less. So that helps a lot. And if you start gaining money, so if your capital goes from 100 to 150, guess what? Now you can start betting a little bit more per trade, right? So this works really, really well in that sense. Now, what I wanted you to see on this slide, by betting a small percentage of your capital per trade on any one single trade, you have to lose 229 consecutive trades before you've lost 90% of your capital. So what I'm showing you here is you really, 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 really need to mess up if you only bet a little bit, right? So what I'm showing you is you can withstand quite a big knock before you've lost all your money, right? Compared to like 10%, after 21 hands, you're out. You don't play anymore. But what I want to show to you later, and we'll focus on that towards the end of today, is you can withstand 22 consecutive negative trades before we're going to take a break. This is something we're going to talk a little bit later, but I just want to introduce that concept here now. Now, what I want to show you is this is the concept that we are evaluating. Like we're saying, if I can survive complete pure randomness, then the logic behind it makes sense, right? Because then I can survive, or I should be able to survive a market, because in the market, there's perception, there's direction, there's drift, there's a little bit more analysis that can be done. So it's not so pure random. So if I can survive pure randomness using this strategy, then that strategy should hold water when I apply it to my equities or my currency trades, right? So that's the premise behind it. So what I'm suggesting is if you bet, and we're going to flick the coin, right? Every time you have the choice to choose heads or tail, and every time that it lands on either one, you're going to be right or wrong. And if you lose your bet, you lose your money. But when you win, you get your original bet back and then the exact amount. So if you bet $10 and you win, I'm going to give you $20 back. Now, a lot of people anticipate this type of landscape, right? So they're saying, let me rephrase it maybe in a different way. When you have a large enough sample size, so if I do this coin flicking thing, right, and there's only two outcomes, it can only land on heads or tails. If I flick this coin 1,000,000 times over, the chances are that it'll land roughly 50% on each one of them, right? Now, that's where people interpret the stats wrong. So they say, okay, well, if it lands at 50% on each one of them, if I flick this 6 times, why does it not follow this nice sequence? Because I have to say out of 6 hands, 3 of them will be heads and 3 of them will be tails, right? Because there's only 2 outcomes. But what you forget is that the sequence of randomness cannot be controlled. So what I'm trying to say is, if you flick this long enough, out of that big pot, yes, 50% collectively will be heads and 50% collectively will be tails. But nothing says that within that, let's say any 10 or 20 flicks, everything was tails as an example. So what I'm trying to say is we needed a strategy that understands that there's 50% probability, but the randomness of this is not bankable. So we can't say, I know for a fact that if it landed on tails, the next one will be heads. Okay, so we need to figure that one out. I've simulated each one of these blocks is 1,000 flicks of the coin. So basically what I'm suggesting is every time I'm going to press the refresh button, it'll calculate 1,000 outcomes consecutively. So we'll start here and it'll follow the trail for 1,000 outcomes. Okay. Now in this particular example, what I'm analyzing is remember I'm saying, if we can withstand pure randomness, then that theory should be able to transport to something where we have a bit of insight. Now, why I'm saying that is what you'll learn is when trading efficiently, you kind of want to stack your edges. Now, what an edge is for example, if there's a trend and the trend is up, you only want to trade upward outbreaks of or breakouts, right? Or you want to trade long positions most likely. So what I'm saying is these little tweaks can be done to improve your chances. So what I'm saying in this example is if I can survive randomness, then technically that side will work as well, right? So look at this for a second. In this scenario, I'm saying every flick, the outcome is completely random. So the system picks whether it lands on heads or tails. And not only that, I've also said in this case, every time there's a new flick, the choice that we make, do we want to choose heads or do we want to choose tails now, is also completely random. So I basically have two random variables happening at the same time. Now, what I'm going to show you is column 1, which is this one here. I'm going to just stress test 1% at a time. So I'm saying at any point in time, the bet that I'm placing is only 1% of my portfolio. And then I'm going to do a 3% because I want to show you that that still looks relatively okay. Okay, so let me show you. Every time I'm going to press this button now, have a look at these two, but don't stress too much whether this goes up or down. What I'm trying to show you is I start here, I'm finishing at the end line there. So what is the chances and how smooth is this line? So let's look at that quickly. So there's 2 times, 3 times. Oh, why is it not updating? 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. Let me just do 10 times. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so I want to show you. We've basically now survived 10,000 flicks of the coin. Now, I do appreciate that every time we start with a balance of 100, so we basically start afresh after every round. But I'm suggesting that, did you see on this graph, we were in the game every single time. And with 3%, yes, it looks a little bit more violent, but for most times, we were in the game for all the hands. So what I'm saying is, would you now start getting a sense of comfort that if you risk 1 to 3% of your portfolio, remember the game is not to outperform the market being correct. I think that's important to understand. What we're trying to do is say you need to be in the market so that you can see all the trades that happen. And in those trades, I'm now going to teach you how you're going to benefit one way or the other. So in other words, when it goes up in your favor or trade in your favor, you should be benefiting a little bit more than the trades going against you. Now, let me show you just for comparison purposes. If I was to make that 5%, now I'm talking about just the right-hand side is now 5%. Look at that immediately, just that small change. Now I'm not so comfortable anymore that I'm going to be sticking around, right? And I can make that, sorry, let's just do a couple of these. So look at that 5%. It is very, very volatile. And that's just 5%. I mean, if I was to risk 10% of my portfolio, I'm not too sure if I'm going to see all the hands. Now, if you're new, this concept might not have been shown to you before. So very often people find themselves just trading at their own comfort level. And if you think of it, if I've got $100 in the account and I lose $10, oh, okay, it's not so bad. I can survive that. But that's putting the emphasis on the wrong place. Can you see what we're doing here is we're now really up to fate. I mean, we're making a ton of money here, but after a couple of whiles, the market stats catches up with us and we don't really know if we're going to survive. Okay, so that's point number 1. I'm just going to quick go back to the slides. So what I've simulated each one of these blocks is 1,000 flicks of the coin. So basically what I'm suggesting is every time, what I'm proposing is that that's one of the components. So what we're doing is, like I said, we're doing a 3-pronged approach. We have to consider all these risks together as one risk mitigant strategy. And remember, today I'm not talking at all about what to do. I'm not giving you any trade ideas. I'm not giving you trading strategies. It is purely risk management, because what I'm suggesting is everybody will find their own rhythm. If you're a day trader, you'll be trading more frequently. If you're somebody with a job, you'll be trading less frequently, right? So the strategies change, but within each of those strategies, there's stuff we can do to scale the market in our favor, right? So I'm assuming that knowledge is known.